At the edge of the Tanzanian plains, just beyond the reach of the golden grass where safari jeeps dare not wander, something strange was happening. A cheetah lay dying in a sun-dappled clearing, her breathing shallow, her ribs rising and falling like the tide, slow and fading. But that wasn't what had stunned the rangers frozen behind the scrub trees. It was him, a juvenile bobcat, miles from where his kind should even exist, perched beside her like a soldier guarding a queen, snarling if anyone got too close, pressing his head to hers as she trembled. No one could explain how he'd gotten there, or why he wouldn't leave her side. But what happened next changed everything we thought we knew about animals, about grief, about love that transcends blood. This isn't a fairy tale. It's not a nature documentary either. It's a story about the wild heart of loyalty and a mystery no one saw coming. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe. If stories of wild bonds, impossible loyalty, and animal instincts that echo human emotion stir something deep in you, this is where you'll find more. Every week, we share true inspired stories that aren't just about animals. They're about us, about healing, about connection, and sometimes about miracles. The sun was cruel over the Eluwai Plains that August, too bright, too silent. No birds, no wind, just the slow hum of insects clinging to brittle stems of yellow grass and the low rise of Mount Lengai sulking in the distance like a slumbering god. Ranger Sefu Mbano stood still, the sweat on his back cooling under his khaki shirt as he peered through binoculars, eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. Below the ridge, half hidden in the acacia shade, lay the cheetah they'd been tracking for weeks. They called her Nabula, gentle in the old Ma tongue. A mother of three, once swift as flame, now reduced to a breathing carcass barely clinging to life. Her flanks shuddered with each breath, and one eye remained half closed, clouded. But that wasn't what froze Sefu in place. It was the creature beside her. At first, he thought it was a jackal, or a young caracal, something common. But as he adjusted the focus, he saw the compact frame, the rounded ears, the soft spotted legs curled tightly like a sentry at rest. A bobcat. He dropped the binoculars. What the hell is a North American bobcat doing in the Tanzanian bush? He whispered. No one answered, because no one could have known. It had started 3 weeks ago with a broken fence. A freight crate at Kilimanjaro Wildlife Transport Hub had been found shattered, metal twisted like ribbon. The manifest said Lynx rufus, a rescued bobcat bound for a sanctuary in South Africa. But the animal was gone. They said he'd escaped, fled into the bush. Not possible, said the airport officials. He'd never survived the Serengeti. Apparently he had. And now, he was curled beside a dying cheetah. Sefu crouched, silently signaling the other ranger, Amina. She arrived soundlessly beside him, her rifle slung low, concern etched into her face. Nabula? She asked. He nodded. Then, but she's not alone. He handed her the binoculars. Amina went still. That's not a cub, she said. That's not even a cheetah. No, Sefu said slowly. It's a bobcat from North America. They both stared. The bobcat was nudging the cheetah's neck gently with his forehead. Nabula responded, barely, a flick of her ear, a soft exhale. Then the bobcat lay down again, curled against her ribs like he belonged there, like he had always belonged there. That night, back at the station, the team reviewed the camera traps. They watched the footage silently. The cheetah stumbling near a waterhole. The bobcat arriving days later, thin, limping, yet determined, approaching her slowly. Sitting feet away at first, then inches, Then, against every law of predator logic, pressing close, curling beside her, guarding her like a shadow. Every night, he slept beside her. Every morning he chased away hyenas, and not once did he leave. The staff debated explanations, imprinting, delusion, survival instinct, but none made sense. He wasn't related to her. She wasn't even his species. Yet somehow, this wild bobcat had chosen to stay with her through what looked like her final days. At dawn, Sefu returned alone. He found the bobcat awake, ears twitching, eyes like gold mirrors in the sunrise. He didn't growl. He didn't move. He simply watched. And Sifu, though a trained ranger who knew better than to anthropomorphize, couldn't shake the feeling that the bobcat was waiting for something or someone, or maybe, just maybe, he was refusing to let go. Not until the end. The rains came late that year. Instead of bringing life, they brought rot. Carcasses of antelope dotted the dry riverbeds, their bones bleaching too fast under the cloudless sky. Even the elephants moved further west, chasing phantom water across the crater rim. But the bobcat stayed, always with her. Rangers began taking shifts to monitor the pair, though it felt more like watching something sacred than wild. They spoke little around the clearing. No one played music in the trucks. No one approached too close. Even the camera crew from Dar es Salaam, sent to document the miracle cat of Eluwai, stood back, humbled by what they saw. On the fourth day, Nabila stopped eating. The team brought fresh meat, goat liver, antelope shank. She sniffed, nudged it away. But when the bobcat dragged a piece closer to her mouth, she took it. Only then, only from him. They called him Tao, the word for lion-hearted. He wasn't large, not as a bobcat should be at that age. His fur was patchy near the shoulder, and his front paw showed signs of an old trap wound. Yet he moved like he had purpose, not just instinct, purpose, as though he believed keeping Nabila alive was his job. Seifu stayed for hours one afternoon, sketching notes in the logbook, but mostly just watching. It was the way Tao touched her, the way he leaned against her side like a frightened cub pressing into a mother's warmth. But there was something inverted in that relationship now. Nabila was barely present. Her body, once sleek and powerful, had withered. Her breath rattled in her chest. Yet Tao, impossibly, refused to leave. Sometimes he'd pace. Other times, he'd disappear for an hour and come back with a lizard, a crushed bird, even a dead rat. Not for himself. He always laid it at her paws. "What is he doing?" Amina whispered beside Seifu during a dusk watch. "It's like he thinks she's still feeding him." Seifu shook his head. "Number, he's feeding her. He's being a son." A pause. Then, "She was never his mother." "I know." But Seifu began to wonder. Had they met before? Had Tao escaped long before the crate incident? Could he have been in the wild, alone, lost, and found by her when he was still a kitten? Had Nabila nursed him once, protected him? Or had their bond formed later, out of need, out of sheer animal empathy? There were no answers, just the slow passage of hours, marked by Tao's faithful vigil and Nabila's fading heartbeat. On the seventh night, a storm broke the sky open. Lightning cracked across the plains like the earth had split its back. Rangers scrambled to set up protective tarps, unsure if either animal would survive the exposure. When they arrived, they found Tao huddled around Nabila's frame, shielding her with his body from the rain. He wouldn't move, not even when thunder rolled loud enough to shake the roots of the baobabs nearby. He pressed his head to her ribs as if urging her to breathe. When Sifu knelt nearby with a thermal scope, he noticed Tao's own body temperature was dropping, dangerously. "You'll die like this," he whispered to the bobcat through the rain, but Tao didn't turn, didn't flinch. He wasn't leaving. By morning, the storm had passed. Nabila was still alive, but barely. Her eyes flickered open only once, and when they did, they met the bobcats. It wasn't human, what passed between them. It couldn't be, but it felt like a goodbye. Sifu made a call to Dr. Isaac Ekwenzi, a wildlife behaviorist in Arusha. When he arrived days later, he watched in silence for half an hour. Then he turned to Sefu and said, "I've studied mother-cub transfers, species imprinting, even trauma bonds. But this is something else. This isn't just grief. It's duty, loyalty." He looked again at Tao. Maybe even love. That evening, Nabila didn't wake again. She passed silently just after sunset, with the bobcat curled against her side, one paw draped across her chest like a child in mourning. Tao didn't howl, didn't move. He stayed with her body until the next day, when the first vultures dared to circle. Only then did he stand. He looked at the sky for a long time, no one could explain why, and then vanished into the brush without a sound. For days, they searched. No sign, no paw prints, no droppings. It was as if he had disappeared with her. But the story didn't end there, because 2 weeks later, in a clearing not far from the ranger's outpost, a ranger found a newborn cheetah cub, and not far from it, watching silently from the shadow of a log, was a bobcat. The cub was no more than a few days old, eyes still fogged with newborn haze, legs trembling like sapling branches in the wind. It lay curled in a shallow depression near a fallen tree, its tiny chest rising in stutters, alone, vulnerable, impossible, because Nabila was gone. Her body had been buried on the fourth hill above the eastern ridge, a grave marked by a lone pile of volcanic stones and an acacia sprig. She had left no surviving cubs, or so they thought. Ranger Amina was the one who found the infant. She'd been checking camera traps when she spotted it, a flicker of tawny fur barely moving under the morning light. At first, she thought it was an abandoned serval, but when she crouched down and the cub let out a raspy, high-pitched cheep, she knew, a cheetah, but it wasn't alone. Lurking 10 meters away, eyes glowing beneath a log like twin shards of amber, was Tao, the bobcat. Thin, dust-covered, his ears crusted with mud and his flanks scarred from new fights, he watched her approach with the weight of something ancient in his stare. He didn't hiss, didn't growl, just stared. And in that stare, Amina saw something that made her breath catch. Permission. She radioed Sifu. He arrived half an hour later, breathless, disbelief scrawled across his face when he saw the cub, alive, mewling, crawling toward the bobcat like it knew him. And Tao allowed it. The moment was as strange as it was sacred. "This doesn't make sense," Sifu whispered. She had no cubs left. Amina knelt slowly beside him. Unless she gave birth again, in her final days. Sifu frowned. "That's not biologically likely." "No," Amina said. "But then again, neither is this." Tao stepped forward cautiously. His movements were slower now, less tense. He nudged the cub gently with his nose, then sat down beside it like a statue planted by time itself. Not once did he look away. And when the cub cried, he placed his paw across its side. Not protectively, possessively. Back at the station, the team reviewed drone footage from the week before Nabula's death. One clip, captured at dusk, showed Nabila digging frantically in the dry soil near a hidden den site. She hadn't been hunting. She was hiding something. The den had since collapsed during the rainstorm. But if she had given birth again, despite her failing health, it was possible she'd moved one fragile cub away from the others, knowing she wouldn't survive long enough to raise them. And Tao? He had found that cub. Over the next few days, Tao remained near the cub, never venturing more than a few yards away. He brought small kills, mice, birds, even an egg cracked open with his teeth. He'd drop them near the cub, encouraging it to eat. He groomed it, licked its fur, slept curled around it through the cold nights. The most chilling part? He'd never been taught to do this. Bobcats don't raise young that aren't their own. Cheetahs don't accept other species as guardians. And yet, this cub followed Tao like he was its mother. By the end of the week, the team had a decision to make. Some argued to intervene, to bring the cub into sanctuary care. Others urged to leave them alone. But Amina's voice, soft and sure, cut through the room like a thread through fabric. She trusted him, she said. When she was dying, Nabula let him stay. Let him protect her. Maybe she knew something we didn't. Sefu looked at the data, the footage, the photos, and then at the clearing map where Tao and the cub remained. Maybe, he said quietly, she didn't just let him stay. He looked up. Maybe she chose him. They let them be. The bond that followed over the next month stunned even the most seasoned scientists. Tao taught the cub to stalk, though his methods were clumsy for a cheetah. He'd hunker low in the grass, dart in strange zigzags, then pause when the cub tumbled awkwardly behind him. He'd wait, turn back, nudge the cub to its feet, and try again. He swatted gently when it strayed too far, growled when jackals came too close, snapped at hawks that circled above, and at night, under the silver wash of moonlight, the two would curl together in the crook of the same log. The bobcat with his ears high, the cub snoring softly against his side. It was clumsy, imperfect, and entirely real. They named the cub Nia, meaning purpose, and the team stopped questioning the strangeness of it all. They simply watched. Two species, one bond, and something more powerful than instinct tying them together. But out there, far beyond the safety of ranger patrols, someone else had started watching too. Not a predator, not a scavenger, but a man with binoculars and a satellite phone and a contract worth more than the price of a sanctuary. Because the bobcat, he wasn't just a miracle of nature, he was a stolen asset, and someone wanted him back. Tao had no idea he was being hunted, but the man following him did. Gideon Rourke had spent the last 15 years tracking rare wildlife, not to study, not to save, but to sell. Exotic animals, especially those with unusual behaviors or genetic anomalies, fetched high prices among collectors. But this bobcat, he was something else. The footage had gone viral in certain circles. North American lynx forms bond with wild cheetah, one blog read. Others speculated he was genetically modified. Evidence of a hybrid, someone had whispered during a private call. It didn't matter what was true. What mattered was that Tao was now worth something, enough to bring Gideon out of hiding. He'd traced the ranger reports, bribed a freight coordinator at Kilimanjaro International, and finally flown in under the cover of ecotourism, camera around his neck, GPS tracker sewn into his boot. Now, he stood crouched in the bush with a long-range tranquilizer rifle, staring at a ridge where two animals played under the setting sun. A cheetah cub, barely walking straight, and beside it, a bobcat, teaching it to pounce on a grasshopper. Gideon's hand tensed on the grip. Got you. Meanwhile, back at Eluwai Station, Sefu had a feeling he couldn't shake. Something was wrong. A camera trap had gone dark. Another had been turned, unnaturally angled upward. Tao hadn't been seen in 2 days. not even in thermal scans, and Nia, still young, hadn't left the shaded glen for water as usual. He strapped on his boots. "Where are you going?" Amina asked. "Out past the southern gorge. The signals are off." "You think it's just battery failure?" "No," he said, loading his tranquilizer. "I think someone's looking for him." Tao wasn't moving that evening. He lay curled beside Nia as she chewed on a small turtle shell they'd found, ears perked as wind shifted over the plains. He didn't know human scent, but something new hung in the air. Something metal. Something wrong. When the dart hit him, he didn't feel pain. Just heat. A sting behind the ribs. A flash of confusion. The world tilting sideways. Nia squeaked, pawing at him. Tao tried to rise. His vision blurred. Legs collapsed beneath him. He looked toward the brush, and through the haze saw boots. A tall figure stepped forward. Gideon. "Well, well," he murmured, stepping over the bobcat's fallen body. "Let's get you back in a cage, shall we?" He bent to retrieve his crate, but paused when a low, furious growl cut through the stillness. It wasn't Tao. It was Nia. The cub, barely able to walk, had puffed herself up, tail bristled, eyes glowing, voice low and broken, but fierce. She stood in front of Tao, trembling, tiny, but refusing to move. Gideon laughed. "You're kidding me." He raised his boot. Before it could come down, a voice thundered from the ridge. "Step away from them." Gideon turned, too slow. A dart hissed from the scrub and struck him in the thigh. He stumbled, cursed, and tried to draw his sidearm, but the tranquilizer was fast. Custom mixed by Sefu himself. Within seconds, Gideon's limbs sagged. He dropped like a stone. Sefu stepped from the trees, rifle still raised, breath ragged. He rushed to Tao first. Still alive, breathing, but fading. Amina arrived moments later, already on the radio with HQ. The helicopter would take 12 minutes. Sefu looked down at the cub, who had now collapsed against Tao's fur, crying softly. "She tried to protect him," Amina whispered. Sefu nodded. "She's her mother's child." The next hours blurred into motion. Medical tents, a wildlife ambulance, local authorities questioning Gideon before he was hauled off in cuffs. He had no permits, no conservation papers, just a hard drive full of animal trade contacts and evidence of years of illegal captures. The story never made it to the international press, kept quiet to protect the reserve. But among the rangers, it became legend. Tao recovered slowly. They treated him in a sanctuary ward near Arusha, where he remained sedated but stable. Nia refused to eat unless he was beside her, so they brought her into the room each day. One afternoon, a caretaker filmed them sleeping together, her body nestled against his ribs, his paw resting lightly over her spine. That clip, accidentally posted by a junior vet, spread across the world in less than a week. Wild Bobcat adopts orphaned Cheetah, then saves her life. It wasn't long before the offers came. Sanctuaries, TV deals, breeding programs. But Sefu said no. So did Amina. And so did the board. They weren't exhibits. They were family. 6 months later, Tao and Nia were released, not far from the place where Nabula had first collapsed. Not alone. A monitored section of private land, protected, wild, and free. Just the two of them. A ranger set up a final camera at the edge of the field. In the footage, you can see Nia, sleek now, older, quick-footed. She sprints ahead, pounces into tall grass, and Tao follows, still smaller than the lions, still foreign, but never out of place, not anymore. Because family isn't made by blood. Sometimes it's made by love that refuses to leave, even when everything says it should. It was just before dawn when the wind returned to the Eluwai Plains. soft at first, more a breath than a breeze. It swept across the golden grass like fingers combing through memory, stirring the dust where paws once pressed, where bones were buried, where a mother once lay dying under a sky too wide for sorrow. And from the ridgeline above, Seifu stood alone, watching the horizon swell with morning. He didn't bring binoculars anymore. He didn't need to. Down there, in the hush of pink and gold, two shapes moved together. A grown cheetah, sleek, strong, her stride unmistakable. And beside her, a bobcat, still smaller, still strange, but no longer alone in the world. They hunted like ghosts across the brushline, gliding as one. It had been over a year since Nabula died, and nearly that long since Tao and Nia were released into the protected lowlands. They'd survived. More than that, they'd adapted. The researchers, skeptics, and specialists who came to observe never stayed long, because nothing in their textbooks could explain what they saw. A cheetah cub raised by a different species, a bobcat who refused to return to his own. They expected the bond to fade, for instinct to override emotion, for Tao to vanish or Nia to move on. But nature had other plans. They remained together, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Sometimes, Seifu would hike out quietly to the outer rim, sit beneath the same acacia where Tao had once curled around Nabula's broken body. The tree had grown since then. Its roots reached deeper, and from its shade, Seifu could just make out the shape of two figures running side by side in the far distance. It didn't look unnatural anymore. It looked right. On a rare evening, Amina joined him. They sat in silence, watching the sunset turn the land to bronze. "She's fast," Amina said, smiling faintly. "Like her mother." "And fierce," Seifu added. "But the way she looks out for him, that's all him." A pause. Then, "You ever wonder what Nabula saw in him that first day?" Seifu didn't answer immediately. He just watched the two figures disappear behind a swell of earth. "I think she saw what he didn't know he was yet." "What's that?" "A guardian," he said. "A second chance." Later that night, wind rustled through the field cameras, and one of them caught a short clip, fuzzy, a bit grainy, but clear enough. Tao, now graying slightly at the whiskers, lay in the grass. Beside him, Nia rested with her head on his flank, eyes closed, breathing steady. But the camera caught something more. The wind stirred the tall grass, and in that moment, it passed over them like a blessing. Both animals lifted their heads briefly, ears twitching toward the trees, as if hearing something, as if remembering, as if feeling someone. Back at the ranger station, that clip now plays on loop in a small visitors center. No narration, no music, just a title at the bottom. Sometimes the bond isn't what you expect, it's what you need. People cry when they see it. Some smile, some stay for hours, because in that quiet moment, just wind and breath and fur and time, you see something rare. Grief that found purpose, loss that became love, and two wild hearts that refused to let go.